On our 30th wedding anniversary, my husband had a pretty string of lights behind him, a ridiculously expensive cake in front of him, and sitting right across the table was his adult son, the one he ran away from years ago. Next to him sat his mother, the woman who once cursed our marriage and our not yet born children. And right in the middle of that party, in front of everyone, she took that curse back. A couple of months later, my older daughter called me from her OB's office and said, "Mom, there's this weird noise. The doctor says it's a heart." If you think this is a romantic story about love conquers all, no. This is a story about how one box of old mail and a very ugly past almost blew our family apart. And yes, this is in the US. Just an ordinary mid-sized city somewhere in the middle of the country. My name is Irene. I'm 52, and most of the time I look like someone who makes way too many decisions for everyone else and doesn't sleep nearly enough. My husband is Andrew Miller. He owns a construction company, has a nice house with white siding, a beloved pickup truck, and the kind of confidence that comes from believing that if he paid the bill, he's basically a saint. We have 2 daughters, Catherine, we call her Kate, and the younger one, Erin, both smart, college-educated with their own lives. Not a single grandchild, not even a hint. And the worst part is, they both really want kids. Really. With doctors, tests, calendars, hormones. Their husbands want kids too, and still, year after year, nothing. If you've ever seen grown women look at other people's strollers at the mall like it's a store window full of things they can't afford, you know what I'm talking about. So of course at some point your mind goes exactly where it shouldn't. What did we do wrong? What are we being punished for? Americans are just as superstitious as everybody else. We just use different words for it. For our 30th anniversary, we decided to go big. Restaurant, music, all the relatives, friends, business partners. And I, as the ideal wife I keep trying to be, decided to make a present for Andrew, a family film. You know, that slideshow under music, his parents' wedding, his grandparents' wedding on the old farm, our wedding, then kids, all that sentimental stuff he secretly loves. The problem was, some of those old photos were in his grandparents' farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere. Old house, tiny town, a few hours' drive. The house had been empty for years, but we still had the keys. "I'll go myself," I told him. "You're busy anyway." Andrew just nodded. "There are boxes with photos up in the attic, they're labeled. And, Irene, if you see that old picture in the bedroom, bring it, okay?" That was my idea, by the way. He just pretended he remembered it too. The picture is a faded image of the Virgin Mary with a child. Nothing special, a copy, not even some antique icon. Just an old Catholic image. But 28 years ago, I was on my knees in front of that picture, sobbing like an idiot and begging God to give me a baby. A couple of months later, I found out I was pregnant with Kate. Yes, I can count. And yes, sometimes it's nice to believe in miracles. The farmhouse sat on the edge of a very small town, the kind with one grocery store, one church, and, I swear, one working traffic light. The key turned in the lock with a nasty squeak. Inside it smelled like dust, old books, and something else. Like the air you get in a place where no one's lived for a long time and somebody worried too much before they left. I set my suitcase down, walked into the kitchen, and froze. There was a man sitting at the table. Plaid shirt, slumped shoulders, gray hair, heavy eyes. Completely real. I blinked, and the chair was empty. No, I don't drink. No, I don't have hallucinations. But sometimes a guilty conscience shows up as a very clear visual. Later, the neighbor across the road, Miss Agnes, a tiny old lady with a yard full of garden gnomes, said, Some folks say old Mr. Miller never really left this place. If he showed himself to you, he must have liked you." "Thanks, Agnes. Super comforting." I went upstairs to the bedroom. The picture was still in the same spot, above the old wooden bed. The same faded image, with that soft, almost sad expression. I took it off the wall and propped it against the door. Then I climbed up to the attic to grab the photos. The boxes really were labeled Wedding 1958, Kids 1960s, Old Letters. I was going to ignore the old letters box, but someone had added in thick marker, "Do not throw out." Come on! How do you not open that? Inside was a pile of envelopes with yellowed stamps. Most of it, bills, postcards, Christmas cards, all addressed to Andrew's parents at the old farm address. I guess mail kept coming here for years after they moved to the city. Then somebody just tossed it all in a box and shoved it up in the attic. And in the middle of all that was a thick envelope with neat handwriting. Mrs. Miller, personal. Return address? Rachel Dawson, some tiny town I couldn't even place right away. The envelope had been opened, but the letter was folded neatly inside, which meant someone had definitely read it and then thoughtfully hid it. I sat right there on the dusty floor and started to read. The letter started out polite. "Dear Mrs. Miller, you don't know me. My name is Rachel. I dated your son Andrew when he was in college." After that came everything I'd half heard once, years ago, whispered in anger by his sister Mary, but refused to believe. He dated a girl, promised to marry her, made big plans. She got pregnant. He said it wasn't his. Then he said it was too soon. Then he said he couldn't afford a kid yet. At some point, he just disappeared. Her parents were poor. Their church was against abortion. She decided to keep the baby. She had a boy, Ryan. When he was 2, they found a serious congenital heart defect. Doctors used those quiet voices they save for the really bad news. The surgeries were insanely expensive. Rachel wrote that she tried to reach Andrew, but her letters came back. So she found his parents' address and started writing them. Politely at first, then desperately, then angry and terrified. "I'm not asking you to take him in," she wrote. "I'm just asking for help with treatment. This is your grandson. This is a child's life." No answer. The years passed. The boy grew, but the disease didn't go anywhere. And then there was the last letter, the one that apparently had been read and shoved into the box. There were no polite phrases in that one. "Fine," she wrote. "So be it. Let your son live as if this child doesn't exist. But may he never know the joy of having a son of his own. And if he has daughters, may they know what it is to want a child and not have one. Let every smile he has years from now be poisoned by what he did." I was sitting on that attic floor with the letter in my hands, and my fingers were going ice cold. Andrew and I, 0 sons, 2 daughters, both infertile. I don't believe in curses, like in cheap movies, but sometimes coincidences get a little too precise to just brush off. I brought the picture home and the box of letters, too. I hung the picture in the guest room until I could figure out where to put it. I shoved the letters into a closet, but of course I couldn't stop thinking about them. A couple days later, Andrew was sitting in the kitchen watching the news and scrolling his phone when I asked, "Andrew, did you have any serious relationships before me?" He shrugged. "There were girls. Nothing serious." "What does nothing serious mean?" "Well, there was one," he grimaced, "who tried to pin a baby on me. But it was sketchy. I wasn't sure it was mine. Dad said if I gave in to blackmail, I'd be paying forever. So I just bailed." He said it the way you talk about canceling a streaming subscription just in time. I looked at him and thought about that envelope with the photo of a little boy with huge eyes and a scar across his chest. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I called someone whose job is to dig up other people's dirt for money. Max Bennett is married to a woman I know from church. Private investigator, former cop. Calm, methodical, always with a coffee cup in his hand. I invited him to my kitchen and put the box of letters and the photo of the boy in front of him. "Max," I said, "I need you to find this woman and this guy, and tell me the truth." "Is this for court?" he asked. "No, it's for me, so I know who I'm living with." We sat in silence while he went through the letters. "Okay," he said finally. "Finding them isn't hard. Getting the truth isn't hard either. But I'm warning you, you might not like it." Spoiler, he was right. Max called a week later. "Found them," he said. "Tiny town a couple states over. Trailer on the edge of town. A beekeeper's place nearby. The boy, well, not a boy. Almost 30. He works for the local beekeeper for cash, sometimes helps out at the store. Walks like every move costs him interest." "Is he healthy?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "No, but he's alive. I talked to neighbors, then to them. Told them I was helping an old acquaintance. They're not stupid, but they're not paranoid either." Max told me how Rachel opened the door, tired woman, hands that had carried way too much for way too many years. Behind her stood Ryan, tall, very skinny, gray eyes, the exact same jawline as Andrew. "He's a good kid," Max said. "Calm. Doesn't complain. Says he grew up and realized that if a man didn't want to be his father back then, there's no point chasing him now." "And his condition?" I pulled his old medical records, ran them by a cardiologist I know. Serious congenital defect. Back then they told her he wouldn't make it to 20 without expensive surgery. Somehow he did. But right now his heart is like an old engine that only runs out of habit. Max paused, then added, "Irene, if anything's going to change, it has to be now. 10 years from now might be too late." "You got a DNA sample?" I asked. He snorted. "I offered him a soda. He finished it, put the cup down, went to help his mom. I took the cup and sent it to a private lab. Compared it with the sample you gave me." Yes, I'd quietly borrowed Andrew's hairbrush for that. "And?" "And you're married to a man who has an adult son. Probability of paternity, over 99%. Sometimes numbers hurt more than words. I'm not the kind of woman who can sit on something like that for months. That night I set the table, put the box of letters in the middle, laid the photo of little Ryan on top and the lab printout over it. When Andrew sat down, I slid it all toward him. "What's this?" He frowned. "This is your son," I said. "And the woman who begged your parents to help keep him alive. And the proof he's yours." At first he tried to laugh it off. "Irene, you believe every woman who writes a sob story?" "I believe DNA," I said. "And I believe my own eyes." He flipped through the letters, went pale, pressed his lips together. "That was a long time ago," he finally said. "I was a kid. I wasn't sure he was mine. Dad said it was a setup. He jerked his head toward the box. "Could have told me." "They did tell you. The letters came to them. They just decided their son mattered more than some kid's life. And you decided the same." He slammed his fist on the table. "What? You trying to put me on trial? After 30 years? "No," I said quietly. "The trial's been going on this whole time. You just didn't show up." We yelled. Then we were quiet. Then we yelled again. Somewhere in that fight, his sister Mary came up. that sister we hadn't spoken to in years. Turns out she found out about Rachel's pregnancy around the same time, tried to push him to help, threatened to tell me. He told her to get lost. They had a huge fight and stopped talking. Suddenly, it made a lot of sense why Mary always looked at me like, "You have no idea who you're married to." That night, he slept in the guest room, the one with the picture of the Virgin Mary. I lay in our bed and listened to him pacing back and forth, then sitting down. And for the first time in many years, I heard my husband pray. "God," he whispered, "I screwed this up. I'm not asking for a miracle. Just give me a chance to do one thing right." I don't know who he was talking to, God, the picture, or himself. Honestly, it doesn't matter. In the morning, he came into the kitchen, face gray. "I'm going to see them," he said. "Myself." "We're going," I corrected him. "This is my family too now." On the drive over, he clutched the steering wheel like it might drop straight into hell if he let go for a second. "You think she'll let me in?" he asked. "I think you'd deserve it if she didn't," I said. "But maybe God still believes you can act like a grown man. Let's not disappoint him." Their town was even poorer than his grandparents' town. Run-down trailers, peeling houses, a grocery store that looked like it wanted to retire years ago. Rachel opened the door and looked at us like someone who'd been waiting for good news her whole life and had finally lost faith it would ever show up. "Hi," Andrew said. I know who you are," she cut in. Her voice was steady, like a stretched wire. "You come to hear how I cursed you? You're a little late." "I came to apologize," he said, "and to ask if I can help." Ryan appeared behind her. Grown man, shoulders as wide as his father's, eyes from somewhere else, softer. He leaned on the door frame like he needed it to stay upright. "Mom, that him?" he asked calmly. "That's him," she said. I stayed out of it. This was their scene. Andrew started talking, not making excuses, talking. How he'd been young and scared, how his father pressured him, how he chose his career over his child, how he knew he was being a coward, and how every year that went by he told himself, "Well, now it's definitely too late." Listening to that was disgusting and honestly a little therapeutic. Sometimes it's useful to hear out loud what you already suspect. Rachel listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Okay, God be with you, but do you have any idea how much all those years cost? Do you know how many nights I sat by his bed wondering if he'd still be breathing in the morning?" "I don't," Andrew said. "And that's on me." He offered to pay for a full workup at a good hospital in our city, any surgery they could do, and all ongoing treatment. No paperwork, no, "if you prove he's mine." Just like that. Ryan looked at him for a long time, then said, "I'm not calling you Dad, okay?" "I'm not asking you to," Andrew said. "I'm the one who has to ask." A week later, they came to our city. Ryan moved into our guest room, the one with the picture. At the hospital, the doctors pored over his old records, shook their heads, and said things like, "We would have loved to see this patient 20 years earlier." But they still came up with a plan. Medication, regular monitoring, maybe surgery, to make life easier. Andrew paid for everything without question. He gave Ryan a job at his office. Not on the job site, obviously, but doing paperwork and helping with clients. Kate and Aaron were stunned at first. "Mom, we have a half-brother?" Kate checked. "And Dad just remembered that now?" "Dad decided to act like a human being now," I said. "Before that, he wasn't in a hurry." Sarcasm is how I keep from sobbing in front of my kids. They needed time. But Ryan turned out to be one of those people it's impossible not to love if you're capable of loving at all. He cracked jokes when he felt awful. He never complained about his heart, even though his face said every flight of stairs cost him. He brought Erin coffee when she got stuck working late. He explained computer stuff to Kate that she hated dealing with. And every night I looked at him and thought, so this is what my son would have looked like if we hadn't killed him before he was born. We just ignored him. Yes, I said it. Yes, it's harsh. But try living with someone for 30 years, then have his conscience show up in human form at your kitchen table. At some point, I realized there was one more ghost in this story, Andrew's sister Mary. We hadn't spoken in about 10 years. Officially, we just don't get along. In reality, one Christmas she said something like, "Must be interesting, living with a man who ditched sick kids." Then said, "Oh, I meant his employees," and went to the kitchen. I decided she was just bitter about money. We'd helped her adult kids, paid for college, and she felt obligated. Holding Rachel's letter in my hands, I suddenly understood what she meant. We met at a cafe. Mary showed up, as always, without makeup, in an old hoodie, with the same look of someone who figured out a long time ago that the world isn't set up terribly fair. "Well," she said. "Finally clicked?" "It did," I answered. "You knew?" She let out a dry laugh. "I found out when Rachel was still pregnant. Tried to make him go see her. Help. At least admit the kid. He said it wasn't his problem and I was sticking my nose where it didn't belong. I told him if he didn't help that child, I'd never spend another Christmas at the same table with him. And I didn't." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew how much you loved him. And I didn't want to be the person who blew up your marriage. I hoped someday he'd man up." Spoiler, he didn't. Not until life slammed him into a wall. We sat in that cafe for 2 hours and cried. Then I said, "Andrew's trying to fix things now. It doesn't erase what he did. But if you want to see him finally do something right, come to our anniversary party." She sighed. "You sure you can handle all of us in one restaurant?" "Nope," I said. "But I really want to see what happens." For our 30th anniversary, we rented a nice restaurant downtown. White tablecloths, a jazz band, a cheerful host who clearly had no idea what show he'd just been booked into. At the table we had us, our daughters and their husbands, Ryan, Rachel, Mary, a couple of close friends, and a few business people Andrew had promised something special to. They got something special, all right. After the first round of drinks, the host suggested Andrew and I say a few words to each other. Andrew stood up with his glass and said, 30 years ago, I married a woman who was better than me at everything. I thought that over time we'd grow more alike. Turns out, I'm the one trying to catch up." He looked at me in a way that, if I didn't know his history, I probably would have forgiven him anything on the spot. "Irene," he went on, "you gave me 2 amazing daughters, and one more child, that I wouldn't let myself see, but you still brought him into our family." He turned to Ryan. "Ryan, I have no right to ask you to call me Dad, but I want you to know, as of today, you're my son not just on paper." Ryan nodded. His mouth trembled a little, but he stayed quiet. Then Andrew said, "At this table, there are 3 people I failed badly in the past. Rachel, Mary, and honestly, you, Irene. I want everyone here to know, if there's a villain in this story, it's me. And if any light came into it, that's not because I suddenly got good. It's because these women turned out kinder than I deserved." Yes, he prepared that. Yes, I helped with the wording. But he meant it. People clapped. Some cried. I thought that was the end of the emotional roller coaster. It wasn't. Rachel suddenly stood up with her glass. I saw Andrew's shoulders tense. Mine too, to be honest. "I'm not big on speeches," she said. "I actually drove here planning to stay quiet." She looked straight at me. "Irene, for a long time I thought you were part of the problem. You were a symbol that he got to have a nice life while Ryan and I didn't, but now I see you're the one who decided to fix this." Then she turned to Andrew. "You know, years ago I wrote your mom a letter. The last one. I was furious. I wrote that you'd never know the joy of a son, and that your daughters would never be mothers. I was so angry I wanted God to hear me." The whole table went dead silent. "I don't know if he heard me back then," she went on. "But tonight, I want him to hear me now. I take those words back. All of them." She lifted her glass. "Andrew, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I'm tired of carrying this stone around. And Irene, I wish your girls as many healthy babies as they want. May their home be full of noise." She downed her drink in one gulp. If you've ever tried not to ugly cry in a fancy restaurant with witnesses, you know exactly how that felt. A couple of months after the party, my phone rang. I saw Kate's name on the screen. "Mom," she said, and I could hear she'd either been crying or was about to. "I'm at the doctor's." My stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "Nothing bad," she sniffled. "Just..." The doctor is pointing at the screen and saying, "Hear that?" And I couldn't figure out what that noise was. And he says, "That's a heart. Your baby's." "Mom, do you get it?" I got it. I got it so much I had to sit down on the floor because my legs didn't feel like cooperating. Then came all the boring but important stuff. Hormone support, keeping the pregnancy, appointments with 3 more specialists. All the same medical procedures as before, only this time everything somehow lined up. Erin started a different treatment plan. It was slower for her, but she finally found doctors who saw her not as a woman over 40, it's kind of late, but as a person who desperately wanted a child. I'm not going to claim everything suddenly turned perfect. Ryan still has limitations. He still lives with a heart that reminds him it's fragile every single day. Andrew will never erase what he did at 20, but our house got lighter. The picture in the guest room stopped freaking me out. Ryan jokes that it protects his sleep. Sometimes I think about that day in the attic, about the box of letters, about the old house where I maybe saw a ghost. Maybe it was just sunlight on an old chair. Or maybe it was the conscience of a man who spent 30 years pretending he didn't have a son, a sick woman in another state, and a string of very precise curses. I don't know if it was the prayer in front of that picture, or Rachel's toast, or just medicine, statistics, and a little luck. Honestly, I don't care. Here's what matters. If you've got some unresolved story in your past, especially one that involves kids, don't wait 30 years for some woman like me to find a box of your old mail in an attic. Because by then, fixing it won't just hurt. It'll be very expensive. And not just in dollars. And if you ever catch yourself whispering into your pillow, "May he never have children. May his daughters know this pain," please remember Rachel driving halfway across the country to stand in a fancy restaurant and say, "I take my words back." Sometimes that's the only way in someone's life to finally hear, "Mom, there's this weird noise. The doctor says it's a heart." Thank you so much for watching. If this story spoke to you, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. I read them all. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.